Pledging your church budget. Our guest today, Pete Stedman. He's the Senior Minister of Norwest Anglican Church in Sydney, and we're talking about how not to step off a cliff and cross your fingers when it comes to budgeting and planning for next year. How to get people enthused and committed to your vision, behind it, and pledging. Pete, thanks for coming in.
Thanks, Dominic.
Now, we'll get to budgeting in a moment, but can we just talk your pastor's heart in lockdown and how you're travelling? How's the church travelling?
Oh, it's hard to know how the church is travelling. I think
you can't see them.
You can't see them, and I think that's what I'm finding most hard as a pastor. When a pastor can't see his sheep, it's hard to know how they're going. I think our online Sunday services are okay, better than okay, they're good. But how's our engagement? How are our people reading the Bible, praying, serving? There's some things we're thinking hard about.
You just had a line as we were sitting down. You were talking to a senior Pentecostal minister, and he was talking about the difference between evangelical churches running through the lockdown and Pentecostal churches running through the lockdown.
Yeah, he was saying to me that he thinks that a lot of Pentecostal churches have lost up to half their people through the lockdown, but Anglican churches have come through much better. His theory is, and I'm not sure if this is offensive or not, but his theory is for Pentecostals, church on a Sunday is much more like a movie, like Schindler's List. You go in, you get inspired, you come out, you want to change the world. For Anglicans, church is much more like a documentary, and he thinks the documentary...
Where you go, you think, you mean?
You think, you wrestle, it's about facts and this and that, less so about inspiration would be his critique. But he thinks in an online screening world, the documentary has translated better, and so our softer numbers have not gone off the cliff in the way that he is concerned about some of his churches have.
It's interesting. I mean, my observation has been that the churches that had the best pastoral care networks set up before COVID are the ones that have travelled best through last time and again this time in terms of where you've been able to make this fairly seamless switch to online small groups and that kind of thing. So it's interesting for us, last week, first week back of term, we had our biggest numbers of the year for the small groups in terms of marking the role in all the small groups. So, that.
Well, I remember you saying to me earlier, a couple of weeks ago or months ago, but that those, you saw those who were praying regularly, reading their Bible regularly, were those who are actually doing very well.
Yeah. Hey, that wasn't why we got you in. This whole thing, budgeting, pledging, it came to you out of crisis.
It did. It's funny how a lot of our good ideas at Norwest either come straight from another church where we rip it off or out of crisis. Now, plenty of bad ideas come out of crisis too, but I started at Norwest a decade ago, a bit over, 10 years ago, and I inherited two great staff, really fabulous staff. But within my first 4 weeks, I looked at the numbers and realised that we had money for two great staff, and there were now three of us on the books, and it just didn't fit. And I was the last in, but I was not going to be the first out because I was the new senior minister. So,
and you wanted to keep them, and so how do you do it?
I wanted to. So I stood up before the church and I said, guys, we've got a challenge here. We've got a problem. We've got these two men and their families who you love. I don't know them, but you do. Now, if we're already here at Norwest giving sacrificially, prayerfully, giving as we can to see the mission of God happen in our midst, and we can't afford three, no problem. We'll work that out in discussion with you and someone can move on. But if we're not giving sacrificially, prayerfully to the glory of God like we could, it's a good time to. And that call to the church actually was remarkable. I remember the numbers, only from that first year, but our budget was 220 when I started. And after that call, that first year, our budget went to 368. So more than a 60% increase. And we're able to keep those pastors. The church responded to the relational dynamic there and a love for these people and for the mission and ministry heart. And I thought, okay, something's worked here. What's worked there? What's worth capturing, and how do we replicate that for the years to come? And that's where pledging for us all grew out of.
I'm thinking for us, we had, we did the big pledge to build the building in 2006, but then we wanted to put on another staff member in 2011, and it was hard to work out whether or not we were going to be able to do it. And so we ran a pledge campaign setting forward the vision and asked people to put in, how do you do it? You ask people to put in forms, or what do you do? Anonymous,
we do.
Private, what?
No, so it's at Norwest, it's anonymous. And I think I grew up in a church background where mission and ministry was essentially you take last year's budget and you add CPI. That always seemed a bit strange to me.
Which is dreadful.
Well, I just don't know how the consumer price index should actually impact the money that would come in, rather than an exciting vision of what the Lord Jesus is doing, lives transformed and a church reaching out into its community. And so we just came up with this idea that felt like rocket science at the time, but it just isn't. We just thought, let's just ask our people what they're going to give. Let's just ask every family anonymously, what do you think you can give next year? And then we'll set the budget to the dollar of what you say. That's where we are now. So yeah, so there's a whole bunch of steps we do, but we put...
Well, take us back to early in the year, beginning the planning.
Okay.
So have you started for next year?
We have.
Yep.
Yeah, about 6 weeks ago. So before then, the senior staff, the executive, the 4 clergy, we are all on board with what our vision, mission, goals are, and our strategy is moving ahead. So we know that where the stretches are in the budget, the new staff appointments, the new ministries we want to do. Then in May or June, so this is the meeting I had 6 weeks ago, I will sit down with my treasurer and he will bring the nuts and bolts and I'll sit down with where we want to go. Now, we run a 3-year projection for our budget, so we've already budgeted for 2022, 23, 24.
You've worked out what staff you want for 2023 and 24?
Yep.
Wow.
We have. And the desired increase that we'd like to give them in their hours, and this, or days, because we've got a bunch of part-timers as well as full-timers. This is a work in progress, so it's flexible, but then we will wrestle with that and we'll see if it's doable. Now, we now have 10 years of trend data that feeds into that. So we are able, out of that meeting, before we even speak to our church, we have a desired budget that we bring before our people, which is a number. And the 3 bits of trend data that are very significant for us are our adult roll, our growth in adult roll, our average pledge, and our number of giving units.
I never liked that term, giving. I mean, I understand giving units is...
It's a technical
real term, but
it's not flesh and blood, is it? It's not relational. Yeah, so we're talking to senior pastors here around the country, so I think they'll understand it. We certainly wouldn't say that publicly, but we're talking about those men and women, boys and girls, married and single, who will give to the ministry of the Lord.
Do you divide between student, retiree and worker in your thinking there?
We haven't, no. We probably should, but no, we just get... What we're after is that key number of how many pledges we think will come in. Yeah, and so we get that number, we look at the average pledge, we then look at our growth data as well, and we're able to work out pretty roughly the number we want to bring before our people as we put a pledge program campaign before them.
Yeah. On that, I mean, different people, different of my friends have gone for... Some senior pastor friends, they know the pledge amount of each individual.
Yeah.
Ourselves, I know black and white in terms of I know who's in our pledge system and who isn't in our pledge system, but not how much each person pledges. So sometimes I joke, if you feel like I'm overly grateful for your $20 a year pledge, or I'm not quite grateful enough for your $5,000 a year or $10,000 a year pledge, it's because I don't know.
Yeah.
You know. But you've gone for not even knowing who's put in the forms.
I don't know who puts it in. I know that 98% of our members pledge.
I mean,
so I know that...
Was it that high at the beginning, or...?
I didn't know at the beginning because we were in trouble, we were in crisis, and we just said give. But after that, we worked it out. And so we now have a culture where just everyone pledges. That is just what we do. And new people come on board and no one questions because the logic is sound, and we've worked hard at making the logic sound. So I know that almost everyone pledges. I don't know the number. When I have known the number, found out here or there, this is a personal thing, it's never been good for me because I've either thought, gee, that's a lot, and been tempted to treat someone more worthily, or I've thought, that's not enough.
Yeah.
But both are really unfair because I don't know their situation, I don't know their heart. So I understand, and the argument is it's actually a pastoral, giving is an indicator, a barometer of someone's spiritual heart and growth, and I understand that argument. It just has never worked for me. I prefer not knowing.
Yeah, I think I'm probably like you on that, in that we've just grown up with the system of me not knowing, and it hasn't been broken, and I'm quite happy not to fix it.
That's right. So, if you were to redo it again, maybe you do it differently. Yeah, that's how I feel too.
Okay, so you've set the budget, and how do you go about presenting? So you're kind of talking October, you're beginning to present
so that's
it?
June, July. Then in August, meeting with parish council there at my house, and we craft a letter that is going to go out to everyone in the church. And so we work hard at that, and then we head into a month of pledging. We call it Pledging 2021, 2022, whatever it is.
There's innovative names there.
Yeah, I know. It needs a bit of work. And so on the first Sunday, I'll get up, and I will get up with a warden, and we'll have 10 minutes at 5 services, and I'll take about 7 of them, and I just talk about how there is nothing better that you can do with your money than give to the ministry of the Lord as you're able. God has poured out his great kindness on us How can we not respond with an overflowing joy and generosity? And I put before people both the privilege and the opportunities before us. And then I get a warden up who's very different to me because I'm concerned with my personality, Dominic, that there might be a few in our church, plenty don't, but a few who think these sound like the ramblings of a slightly unhinged person who doesn't quite understand how business works and this, that and the other. It's good to know how you come across, right? But then a warden gets up and says, we're with Pete. We've done this for a decade. It's excellent. It always works. Thanks so much for your partnership. And we've just found that with the poetry and the plumbing together, the different personalities, that works. Then after the service out on the deck, parish council and staff will put a personal letter, it's personalised on the front of the envelope into every person's hand, and they have a month to take that home and to bring it back. If they're not there that week, it's in their hand the second week. If they're not there that week, it's posted out. But I say to people, don't pledge today. You're getting the letter today, don't pledge today, because what I want to do is slow everyone down. And I say, please go home, clear the table, clear time, and put on the kettle. And sit around a table with those in your family who are also involved in financial decision making. If it's by yourself, that's fine. If it's with a husband or a wife or kids, draw them in and ask yourselves this question. What does generous, sacrificial financial partnership at Norwest look like for the Stedmans next year? Because I don't think people do it.
Generous, sacrificial...
Partnership in the gospel.
Yeah.
Because I don't think people do it. And so I want to move people from tipping to tithing. Okay. Now, I don't mean tipping and I don't mean tithing, but I mean that God's been good, I'll give a bit back, to actually, that just wanting to give to God out of the first fruits of the things that He's done for me. I want to move that culture, and I want to actually get people deliberately, intentionally, strategically thinking about, what does it actually look like for me to be generous with my time and my money? We do it for serving as well, but that's something I don't want just the number written down on the piece of paper.
And then these forms come in.
Yeah, these slips start to come in, and so we give people a month, and I run every month, every week of the month for 5 weeks. I get up and give an update, and I say, okay, so friends, we're expecting.
So the pitch is the first week.
Yep, and you get the envelope.
And you get the envelope.
And you take it home.
And then, do you pitch again? Do you pitch? I'll tell you about what we do in a moment. But you pitch again each with more details of the vision?
No, I don't pitch again. It is one pitch. Which is, and there might be some socials around that, and that hits everyone, then everyone gets the letter, and then there is an update each week through the month of pledging, through the campaign.
Right.
An update of what's come in, how it's come in, how we're tracking, and where we're going.
So I've got two questions. I'm going to go down two alleys. The first alley is, I'll just tell you that for us, what we've done is we've pitched different aspects of our vision each week over 5 weeks, and we're using it as a educative campaign as well as of how we're going and where we're going. And all
I've seen some of your stuff. It's intimidatingly good. It's very high quality, and as I said to you before, I looked at it and I thought, see, this is the difference between an ex-journalist, a professional who puts together a campaign,
or
versus
someone who surrounds himself
or someone
with
who
very
surrounds himself
gifted people,
compared to an ex-PE teacher. Right. And so mine are just words, and yours are all pictures, but very evocative and very helpful, is my guess.
And one of the strategies we worked out was we worked out that we would have the pitch from the platform led by 2 of our members each week, and that wouldn't talk about money. It would just talk about the vision of the church and where we were going and what we were hoping to do under God. But the pitch in the community group, where we would play a video each week, and they're the videos I've linked to on the show notes, they would actually say, this is the, as well as the vision, they'd also say, here's the dollars and here's how the money works and that kind of thing, so that we're not doing money from the platform. We're doing...
So we don't talk about money in the first week.
Yeah.
It's all about mission and vision and where we're going. Again, you sort of build these things over time, and if you had your time over, you'd go back. I look at what you do and I think, I think that's what I'd do this time. But it still works, and ours does work. It's been highly successful in God's kindness. So it's the vision up front, it's the letter in hands, and then it's just that regular...
Now, the other thing that got me thinking about what you've done that I'm wanting to workshop with you is announcing your kind of total each week during the 4 weeks. How does that go? Because we've just gone all of our fingers crossed for the last weekend and bring your form in.
So
that
we
weekend.
don't. So one of the things I've learned. So when I first started at Norwest, I had someone come and join me in a volunteer capacity on staff from my old church at Roseville, who had been a very senior director at the Boston Consulting Group, BCG. And BCG brilliant at all the things that I'm not. Vision, communication, strategy, alignment, all of this sort of stuff, right? You know, I didn't get that at Moore. Maybe others do, but I didn't. This guy was phenomenal. And so this all fell out of what he told us. And one of the things he said to me is he said, you need to know that a narrative will grow in a vacuum of information. A narrative will grow. It'll be false if you're not in front of the narrative. He said you need to over-communicate and always. You deal with the complexity behind the scenes to present the clear, simple message. But if you don't communicate clearly, redundantly, people will just make stuff up. You know what? That's what I do when I watch Gladys and I think, well, why wouldn't you do this? She's probably doing this. How would I know what Gladys is doing? So I think we all do it. So I've always at Norwest wanted to get in front of the narrative by controlling it with the reality and the truth. That's the logic behind giving this update all the way through.
Give me the burst on redundant communication. I like it.
Yeah, over and over and over and over in different forms from different styles, so online and from the front and then in a weekly email and then the tap on the shoulder and then through a community group. So people start to say, okay, that's what's happening here. This is the season we're in.
And then you said you don't do things if you don't get the money. Have there been times, because they have for us, when we didn't get the target we were looking for, and how have you handled that?
So I think, again, this is for us in our context. People have to work out how it works for them. I think I would do damage to the reputation of my parish council and to myself and the leadership team if we were to say, so imagine this. So I said to the whole church, so we need $500,000 this year. Really exciting because we want to do this, this and this. And everyone's, okay, we're going to do it. And 450,000 comes in. And I get up and say, friends, in God's kindness, 450 grand came in, so we're going to celebrate that. But you know what? We've done a bit more work, we've tightened our belts, and we're able to do everything we told you. I reckon at that point some people might think, now hang on. Why didn't you do that work beforehand? Because actually, are you managing our money carefully here? So if we ask for $1 million and 950 comes in, there is always something that we will not do and we'll communicate that we will not do it. So friends, we wanted to move our kids pastor from part-time to full-time. We're not able to do that right now. We're 50 grand short. We're so thankful for the 950, but we're 50 grand short. We're going to keep praying about that. We'll see how the giving's going by June. Or perhaps if you want to speak to us about making another gift, feel free to do that as well. But here's where we're up to. So transparent, clear, but I think for us in our context, that keeps integrity around the process.
What we've done is we've had the Pledge and Gift Sunday, and then we spend 2 more days chasing up those leftover forms that haven't come in. And then we have a parish council meeting on the Wednesday night where we actually either have a great mood of celebration or a kind of, oh, this is going to be tricky, what do we do here? And then we announce the either good news or the almost good news the following Sunday. Is that how you've played it?
Well, so again, we take them on the journey over the month so people know. So essentially, we expect there's almost no pledges that come in week 1. There's just more than no pledges on week 2. You've got 25% who come in week 3 and you've got 60% that come in week 4. That leaves another 10% which then come in between the end and Christmas. That's sort of, we know that's how it works.
So do you have a big announcement day?
We announce all the way through. And at the end, I'll say, so friends, you know that we're hoping, we think there's 250 families and individuals who are going to give here. Right now, we've had 232 pledges come in. That tells us, and we're after $1.2 million, and right now we're at $960. That tells us that 87% of I'm making up the stats here, 87% of Norwest have pledged 88% of what we're after. We're so encouraged. Thank you. To those of you who have already done this, often I don't pledge to the last Sunday, so one thing I say is, if you haven't pledged yet, and you know what, I've got to put my hand up here because I haven't yet, but I will be today. If you're one of that 13%, please know we make real decisions in real time about real people or about your pledging, and we're meeting next week to make some serious decisions. So thank you so much for your partnership.
Take us into that parish council meeting.
Yeah, so it's probably a couple of weeks later. And again, because of our trend data, we know where it's going. We've got a shape for it. Dominic, to be honest, and I hope I hear this the right way, we hit budget. We're not under. 3 years ago, I think we ended up 6% under what we were after. So we made a tweak and we wanted to increase our Mandarin staff worker from 2 days to 3 days. That didn't happen then. In subsequent years it did. But one year we had 103% of our people pledge 106% of the required budget. That was because when I went through the roll and worked out who our members are who would pledge, we then had new people join us in between who started giving. So we had a great laugh about that as a church. That, I love leading a church where 103% of people pledge. But one of the things, because it's now been done for 10 years, it's part of our culture, people do it. Because I don't think as a minister you can stand up at church where you don't do this, or where you bring this in and say, we're moving to pledging and we guarantee we'll set our budget to the dollar, not a penny more, not a penny less, which is what we say at Norwest, because we know that almost everyone does it. Because if you launch this and 70% of people get on board and 30% don't, of the 100% who normally give, but you've promised to set your budget to the pledged amounts, then you're going to run a 30% smaller budget than the year before. So you can only build to this as it becomes part of the culture.
When you hear churches tell stories of we're going to have to let X go because we don't have enough money, I never really am convinced about we don't have enough money. I think we haven't set the vision forward properly. But do you want to
I would say a 3-year projection for your staffing really helps with that. And so you should know whether you're going to be able to do that or not. I mean, again, we just haven't been in a position where we've taken a big hit. We did something different last year for the first time. Instead of having a larger budget than the year before, because every year for a decade it's gone up, we decided to set the 2021 budget, this year's budget, to match the 2020 budget because of COVID. Because we didn't know who was who in the zoo and what was going on. And in God's kindness, that went really well. But
we did something similar.
Yeah, I think plenty of churches would have had to have. I just think... So we're talking to a staff member now. We're making some changes in a particular area. That we've got a new staff member coming on. We've got an existing staff member who's happy to leave but happy to stay, and we're trying to care for them in that context. Before we make any decisions about saying, look, we're sorry, there's not a role here, which this person has said to us, I'm totally fine with that. It is incumbent on me to go to our people and say, something's happened here. There's been a change. An opportunity's opened up here, and I want you to give towards that, above and beyond. Now, we've tried not to do that, because another thing, when I started at Norwest, the budget had not been good. There was a bit of a culture of passing the hat for light bills and this, that and the other, and we weren't giving much to missions, or it was in addition, and I just thought, no, we're going to ask for money once, and we're going to be responsible with it. We wanted to build real trust that we handle money well, because I wasn't convinced that culture or sense was there. And so now, if we need to let a staff member go, we'll know 2 years out that we need to do that. And that's when the conversation would start, because of a change of direction. And we've had to do that in the last 3 or 4 years.
Right. What about educating people on the issue of money versus what you're preaching on during that time of the pledge season? How do you wrestle with those things?
So I once heard someone say that the worst time to speak about giving is when you need money. Because it raises all sorts of questions about, okay, you bring this before us now because we're in a hole. So we never link our pledging campaign to a particular preaching program around giving. We just preach what we preach. We just try to preach the whole counsel of God, and as money and generosity comes up, we'll nail that. The exception is we're doing a building project at the moment, and we need $3 million, and we've raised 1.8's pledge.
Just drill down on that. We're building project at the moment. What does that look like?
So again, lots of growth and needing to find more space. So where our property is 3 acres, but our church is right up the back, and we are unknown.
Just let me, 3 acres. That's just unfair.
Yeah, I know.
Here we are in this little matchbox of land in the inner city.
I better not critique the property in any sense.
Do you know how many car parking spaces we have at this church? 1.
Yeah. So I won't talk about our problems with car parking, because I'm not sure where we put over 100. I'm not sure where they go after that.
Right.
But, so we've run out of space. So we've got a staff team of 15 now, and kids and youth everywhere. And so we're building a new building down the front, which is actually going to create ministry space, get all staff together, and open up around 160 square metres of kids and youth space, but also increase the auditorium capacity from 325 to 400.
Right.
And so we're doing that. And so money's coming in. So we did a campaign called Seek First His Kingdom, we didn't want to do, building for the future or anything like that. We just wanted it on the gospel. We wanted it all about Jesus. And so I did a 4-week preaching program on the building project. And at the end,
when was this? A month or two ago?
This was 18 months ago.
Right, okay, yeah.
And people were saying to me, you're not talking about money much. Well, that's right.
Talking about your priorities.
We're talking about Jesus. We're talking about the gospel. We're talking about that we're going to seek first his kingdom and everything else will be added. Mm-hmm. And money poured in. And then we were a bit short, so we went back and another 200,000 came in. And so we ran a particular preaching program for that. We made videos. The stuff we did for that looked like what you do every year for yours. We had videos, we had glossy literature.
But setting for the vision, yeah.
Yeah, so that went well. But that giving, I mean, that's another interesting thing, isn't it? People do have different pockets, because I had a sense that our people were pretty strapped, and yet our people found another 1.8 million over 3.5 years for a building project, in addition to our large budget for our church right now.
Yeah. So, why wouldn't people do a pledge campaign?
Because I think there's manifold reasons. One of them is, I think people are nervous about talking about money. I have been historically. I've been in churches before where there has been an apologetic tone to talking about money, and I remember thinking, I will never do that. I'll never rob people of one of the greatest gifts, which is to be generous in life, and that's in every aspect. And so I've always got in the front foot, and that seems to have worked. I think people aren't quite sure how to ask. They're not sure, should it be anonymous? They've had a system that's sort of worked. You know, the plus CPI does work. You'll go up by 4.5% a year, or 2.9% a year. But does it actually spiritually grow people and stretch them? Maybe it can. I didn't see that in my context. I think you need to be organised. You need to start in May. You need to build some things in. But these are all just sit in our calendar now. It's just simple. My treasurer is amazing. He's been there for 9 years, and he drives a lot of this. Pete, time to meet up. Yeah, let's do that. And there's a real trust and synergy now between the parish council, the wardens, the treasurer and myself, because we've done it over time and we've seen the fruit, and God's been so kind through it. I think there's a bunch of reasons why people don't do it. It can feel pretty intimidating and a lot of hard work, which is why I hope some of the resources that you've put up for people and some of the stuff that I've added as well, if anyone wants to use it or rip it off, I think that, I mean, not the logos, but other than that, you know, yeah.
No, I mean, that's the whole spirit of what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
We're trying to encourage people to be entrepreneurial in their thinking. What's your journey, your personal journey on thinking through generosity and giving been? Because you can't lead the church on this unless you work it out yourself.
Okay, so I had no idea you're going to ask this. And I don't care that anyone's watching, I'll just tell you the truth.
Yeah.
I'm not generous by nature. So I make sure I'm one of the biggest givers in our church. And I am. I'm one of the biggest givers in our church. No one knows that. No one knew that. No one needs to know that. But it is an antidote to the hardness of my own heart of wanting to hoard. And I figure if I can actually make that decision there, which we did, my wife and I, a number of years ago, now we don't think about it, you know. I trust that as I work on this and pray about this and see generosity in others, I surround myself with generous people, and I trust that it spills out more and more from me. And not just money. Actually, money's nothing at one level. It's actually a generosity of spirit, the generous assumption as we deal with people, a generosity of time, a generosity as I deal with my staff, a generosity in my tone, a generosity as I look at the church and my head wants to say, oh, you know, you're not, no, these are God's people. They're amazing and they're works in progress like you. So I think that's part of the answer.
Yeah.
Yours?
Well, in 2005, I was working on some talks on money, and I read Craig Blomberg's thesis on neither riches nor poverty.
Yeah.
And he got to the end of his thesis, his book, and he talked about, here I am, a theological college lecturer, I've got a wife who works part-time, and when we were newly married, we were giving 10%, and we decided somehow as a couple that we were going to try and grow in generosity every year. So not just in dollars, but in percentage every year. And I thought, and then he said, and here we are, 15 years later, 20 years later, whatever, and we give the last couple of years 30% away, and we live in an okay house, in an okay neighbourhood, we have an okay car, not the best house, not the worst house, not the best car, not the worst car. And I thought, well, you're a theological college lecturer, you're probably earning the same as me. You've got a wife who's working part-time, I'm working part-time. Oh, sorry, my wife's working part-time, your wife's working part-time. You made this decision when you're newly married. Maybe we had 2 kids who were little at the time.
Yeah.
I thought we could aspire to be like that. And so just every year since 2005, I mean, I think we were giving probably 10% in 2005, but every year since 2005, we've just tried
To stretch.
Yeah. Not just in dollars, but in percentage. And some years, like the year we did the building project here, it was just kind of a leap.
Yeah.
And some years, I mean, and actually last year we made a big jump, and then what with COVID, we had a big, Kathy particularly had a big income drop, so it actually percentage-wise was a big challenge for us. But to try and be growing and then years later I heard Rick Warren speak on this, and he said that he'd done the same thing 35 years ago. And last year he'd gone from 91 to 92% or something.
That he was giving.
That he was giving.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, well that's just off the charts compared to me.
Yeah.
But he said you want to grow in generosity every year in your heart, and I thought, I do. I do want to become more Christ-like every year in my heart.
You cannot stand before your people and speak on this with integrity and conviction if you're not wrestling with this. Because I feel like an utter sham. I am an utter sham if I'm not actually wrestling with what true generosity, gospel-hearted, sacrificial generosity looks like. And I forget it along the way, but I know when I live it, I love it. It's so joy-filling and giving.
It feels good.
Amazing. And I don't miss what I give. I never think, I wish, I could upgrade my car. I don't want to upgrade my car. I quite like my car. It's an old whatever, but what a joy.
Thanks for coming in.
Pleasure.
My guest on the Pastor's Heart, Pete Stedman. He's the Senior Minister of Norwest Anglican Church. And thanks for your company this afternoon. We'll look forward to you being back with us next week for the Pastor's Heart.